following period two, Europe is going to enter into a period known as the Enlightenment in the 1700s, and the spread of the Enlightenment is going to lead to the spread of certain ideas, okay? Ideas about democracy and equality for all people, right? So one of those philosophers or one of those leaders in the Enlightenment is known as John Locke, and he is going to come up with the idea of natural rights. These are natural rights that each human is entitled to, that they are born with, and those rights include life, liberty, and property. Now that's different than what we're going to see in period three with the American Revolution with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson's going to say, oh, we have inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, where did he get that idea from? He got it from John Locke, from the Enlightenment. So he just changed the words a little bit of plagiarism there. And so this is going to lead to the push for abolition. Abolition of slavery, the end of slavery, because slavery can't be reconciled with these ideas of, hey, everyone has a right to life, everyone has a right to liberty. Okay, that's really counterfactual to what slavery is all about. And also the idea that people are not property. Okay, so as these Enlightenment ideals spread through Europe, you're going to see that there's going to be pushback against slavery with abolition, especially in the Americas, as educated people of African descent start coming into contact with these Enlightenment ideals, and they use it to push for abolition. So we're going to see some slave revolts that are prompted by the spread of Enlightenment ideals. And this is going to be one of the most successful slave revolts in history. Toussaint Louverture, or Louverture, however you want to pronounce it, it's a written test. He led a revolt in Saint-Domingue. Okay, now Saint-Domingue was a French colony. Remember that under mercantilism, the purpose of colonies is to enrich the mother country. Well, France controlled this colony, and they also controlled the cash crops that were grown in Saint-Domingue through enslaved labor, coerced labor. And so Toussaint Louverture, who was educated in the European Enlightenment, brought these Enlightenment ideals and led a revolt against the French, demanding the same rights that Europeans received under the Enlightenment of life, liberty, and property. So Haiti is going to become newly independent in 1804. This is the first country in the Americas to end slavery, early in 1804 in the 19th century. Okay, slavery is going to be ended completely in the Americas by 1888 with the end of slavery in Brazil. So Brazil is the last one to end slavery. What's unique about this slave revolt is that Haiti and the United States were the only ones to host a full-scale war to end slavery. Remember that the United States ended slavery in 1865 with the passing of the 13th Amendment. So for 1804, Haiti was first. Then we have slavery ended in all of the Western Hemisphere by 1888. But what's unique about Haiti is the same thing that's unique about the United States abolition of slavery, is that they hosted a full-scale war in the fight to end slavery. Okay, but the transatlantic slave route was not the only type of slavery that existed in the world. Remember that we had Old World slavery, primarily in the Indian Ocean slave trade. So whereas the western coast of Africa was devastated by the Asiento, by this New World slavery, the eastern coast of Africa had a different type, the Old World slavery, where it was mostly prisoners of war and debtors and criminals. And this hit its peak in the 18th to 19th century, so the 1700s to the 1800s. All right, so slaves from the east would be sold to northern Africa along the Trans-Saharan route, to the Middle East, where there were some sugar plantations where you have that very brutal form of slavery like what we saw in the Zanj Rebellion, and also India. And then instead of them working mostly on cash crops, these enslaved peoples usually worked in the shipping industry or as house servants or sailors or soldiers, and some could rise up in status and eventually gain their freedom. And remember that slavery was not hereditary at that point, and they also worked side by side with free laborers. Also, with this type of enslavement, they had certain rights under Islamic communities. So they had the rights to marriage, they had more opportunities, and also with a conversion to Islam, they would be freed from slavery. Okay, so this is a less devastating, less deadly form of enslavement, but it's important to note that slavery is bad. So even if you're comparing old world slavery with new world slavery, you can say, okay, here are some similarities, here are some differences. This one was more deadly, this one was less deadly. These enslaved peoples had more rights, these enslaved peoples had less rights. But in no uncertain terms should you ever say, oh yeah, this slavery was good or this slavery was bad. Across the board, it is bad. We're just comparing and contrasting the different types of coerced labor systems. So if you compare this to indentured servitude or you compare it to serfdom, there are going to be some similarities and differences, but across the board, people want to be free, which is why we have the popularity of the Enlightenment in Europe, but also in other areas in the Old and the New World. Now, in the Schoology page, I do have this John Green video reviewing the Atlantic slave trade. I would recommend that you watch that as a review, and then also an informational video on the Atlantic slave trade as well. But that's going to end our lecture on Africa in the early colonial period, or Africa in Old Imperialism. And then we're going to move on to our DBQ lecture as we get prepared for your second essay of the year.